Psst, psst, psst.
Hey,
did you hear?
Did you hear about the new podcast?
Hoy,
What's it called? It's literally called
Psst.
What?
There's a new podcast
There's a
out
new
right now.
podcast?
It's from Fil-CHA.
Filipinx AO sharing stories together, as in the Psst podcast.
All right. Hi, everyone. So this is our pilot episode of the PSST podcast, aka the Filipinx AO's Sharing Stories Together podcast. It is housed under the Filipinx AO Community Health Association, which recently was called the Filipinx AO COVID-19 Resource and Response Team. We recently went through a name change, but thank you so much for joining us on our first ever pilot episode and first ever episode of this podcast. My name is Arleah Aguilar, and I'll be one of the internal hosts for this podcast. So as I mentioned, we are housed under Fil-CHA, which we will talk more about who we are exactly later down the road. But I just did want to give a shout out to our wonderful leaders, Dr. Ninez Ponce and Dr. Carlos Aronce. They are our president and president-elect of our newly established organization. So just wanted to mention that as well. We'd also like to give a thank you to the Association of Asian Pacific Community Health Organizations, aka AAPCHO, as well for making this possible and for all the wonderful support they have provided us in getting this podcast started. And also a big thank you to the Walmart Foundation for the generous support through partially funding this podcast. So to start off, we're going to just introduce you all today on all those involved in the podcast, just to get to know you, pilot episode of who we are, how we got started as Fil-CHA, as well as why this podcast exists. So to start off, I would like to introduce all the internal hosts, and then to follow, we have a couple behind the scenes individuals who are helping us also, who are part of the Fil-CHA team. So as I mentioned, my name is Arleah Aguilar. The internal host will do a more thorough introduction to follow, but for now, we're just going to quickly introduce our names and pronouns just for you all to know who we are, and then we'll do and then we'll switch over to introducing the rest of our team, and then into the actual content of today's podcast. So Eddie, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Hello, everyone. Hello, world. My name is Eddie, and my gender pronouns are they, them, he, him. Hello.
Hi, y'all. Good morning. My name is Andrea Mackey, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bradley Ramos, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hey, everyone. My name is Leezel Tanglao, and my pronouns are she, hers, and hers.
Thanks, team. I forgot to mention my gender pronouns are she, her, hers as well. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Really super excited to be with you all and have this phenomenal team introduce themselves. So next, I would like to have the networking and outreach members. We have different committees within Fil-CHA, so networking and outreach is one of them. And we have wonderful support by three lovely individuals who I will have themselves introduce to follow. So I'll pass on the mic to Jennifer Kayanan. She is our website developer for Fil-CHA and for the networking and outreach subcommittee.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Arleah. My name is Jennifer Kayanan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Networking and Community Outreach Subcommittee for Fil-CHA. I am also going to be one of the website developers for Fil-CHA, and in my day job, I work for the California Department of Public Health.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. And next we have another one of our website developers, a part of the Networking and Outreach Committee within Fil-CHA, and I'll pass on the introduction to Shane.
Great, thanks, Arleah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shane Esmundo. My pronouns are she, hers, sha. And again, I'm also the website developer developer for Fil-CHA, so I'll be working alongside with Jen. And outside of Fil-CHA, I'm the community outreach coordinator for Cedars-Sinai Cancer Research Center for Health Equity, where I spearhead the Filipinx AO research projects, and we really focus on community-driven research, outreach, and engagement. I'm very excited for this first podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. And next we have our lovely social media manager. For those that follow us on our handles, we recently changed our name from @Fil-COVID to @Fil-XAO-CHA. And so this person that I'm introducing has been doing phenomenal work behind the scenes. She's amazing and has been on it with sharing resources. So if you would like any resources or connections, follow us on @Fil-CHA-XAO on Twitter and Instagram. But I would like to introduce Alexa next.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexa Fontanilla and I use she, her pronouns. Like Arleah said, I am the social media manager for Fil-CHA, so please give us a follow and a like on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'm also a part of the network and outreach subcommittee. And during my day job, I work as a certified nurse assistant and a registered behavior technician. All in all, I'm so excited for this podcast and I can't wait to see what we have next.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alexa, Jen, and Shane, for introducing yourselves. We are so grateful to have you all be a part of this team. So if you see them kind of drop off, that's because we're going to be having the internal hosts run the rest of the episode, but some of them will be staying on, and they do a lot of behind the scenes work. So just because you don't see them doesn't necessarily mean they're not here. But yes, thank you so much for the introductions. So we're going to move on and segue over to our next portion of the podcast. So I'm going to pass on the mic to our wonderful internal host, Eddy.
All right. So to get to know us a bit more, and also with my name, I believe I only just said Eddy, but my full name is Eddy Gana Jr. And that's important for me because my dad's name is Eddy and my brother's name is Eddy. So it was very confusing growing up. So just Eddy Gana Jr. Yeah. Or folks just call me JR in the household. Anyways, probably I'll go a little bit more into that later. But do want to have the opportunity for our team here to speak more about themselves. Feel free again to say your pronouns, affiliations, your interests, and why did you get involved in Fil-CHA? So let's go first with Leezel.
Thank you, Eddy. Again, my name is Leezel Tanglao, and I've been a journalist the last 17 years. So my day job is as a journalist, storyteller, basically at the intersection of editorial, data, revenue, and product. I like to say being Filipino has definitely prepared me for that because we definitely multitask and we are at the intersection of a lot of spaces. Besides what I do for a living, I am involved with the Filipino community through various associations. The one I'm most active in right now is Fil-Pro. So I'm currently the Vice President of the Filipino Young Leaders Program, and I serve as the COVID-19 Task Force Chair, as well as the Project Director of TAIO, which is our help desk for the Filipino American community during COVID-19. In addition, I'm currently the host and executive producer of Blood Debts, which is a podcast about people's relationship with debt that goes beyond money, featuring all Filipino stories in the diaspora. And I got involved in Fil-CHA through my affiliation with TAIO and Fil-Pro, and just basically making sure that our community has the most reliable and culturally tailored information, especially during this pandemic, and as well as beyond, and making sure that we're fighting misinformation on top of that, and also making sure we have the best information about ourselves, better collection of data. So that's me.
Thanks so much, Leezel. All right. So how about Andrea?
Hard to follow that up. Leezel is amazing. So hi, y'all. I'm Andrea Mackey. I use she, her, hers. I'm currently a second-year master's in public health student at UC Berkeley, focusing on health and social behavior. So a lot of the reasons why I'm involved with Fil-CHA and a lot of other organizations is because, I'm coming today with you for love for my community. Being a community organizer, community health worker, and an ethnic studies high school educator, really want to feel the love, as well as I have a lot of indignation, anger with a purpose. We've seen how our community has been left behind, ignored, attacked at all different intersections. And so being a part of Fil-CHA has really allowed me to feel empowered to make change. That's not something that I wish to see any longer. And so we're doing it through health, we're doing it through organizing, and I'm excited to be here with you all today.
And it's so wonderful that we're able to be connected no matter where we're at, right? Being able to do this work online and then also on the ground. And, for me, it's the first time meeting a lot of the folks here. So I'm very honored, to continue to build. And we got this for Fil-CHA. So next up, let's go with Bradley.
All right, thank you, Eddie. So again, my name is Dr. Bradley Ramos. I'm currently a clinical pharmacist with the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services, where I work on developing refill authorization protocols at one of our LADHS facilities. Other community organizations I'm a part of is the Kapwa Health Collective, where we strive to respond to the health needs in the San Francisco Filipinx AO area, community and area. So, why I got involved with Fil-CHA on this podcast. My dear friend, Arleah, actually persuaded me or recruited me to be a part of Fil-CHA. Coming from our work with the Northern California Filipinx American Student Alliance, or NCPASA, we helped kind of refound that and kind of rebuild it. And that helped with, trying to discover identity as like an organization. And so she brought me on board to help out with the mission and vision. So some sort of rallying cry that we can all kind of get behind as an organization. And as far as the podcast, as a pharmacist, I definitely have, we always preach that a lot of the things that we do is data driven and data informed. However, those don't always capture really the color and the grit and the stories that come behind our community. And, as Fil-CHA and this, wild time that we're in, unfortunately, I think it's so important that we really highlight these voices and these stories. And so that's why, I thought this was such a great idea. And I'm glad that we're finally to have everyone watching be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Bradley. That is very important, highlighting stories, making sure that our stories are not erased and that we're able to speak for ourselves, we're able to let other folks know about what's happening within our community. And you speaking about Arleah and you two, being connected, I think that speaks to that Kapwa spirit, the togetherness, and then definitely resonates for all of our hosts here. For me, myself, I'm originally from Union City, from the Bay Area. I lived in Southern California since 2006, and I've been here ever since. And I do work at Search to Involve Filipino Americans. I am a mental health counselor, so I provide family counseling to Filipino families all across LA. And I'm also a community organizer in historic Filipino town. I run an open mic series called Sunday Jump. And so we have like guidelines like express, not impress, free speech, not hate speech. Ultimately, a space where folks can share their stories and create genuine connections through the arts. So this is also why I love doing this podcast here with you all. And other than that, I am also a part of a spoken word duo with my partner, Stephanie Sajor, and we go by Steady. And so just with the arts, really, it's accessible, it's universal. If you haven't written a poem, I encourage you to do so because it is April. It's National Poetry and Writing Month. So please continue to share your stories. And so, yes, with that said, I would also want to hear actually a little bit more from Arleah. Yes, Arleah.
Well, thank you so much, Eddy. And yes, if you have not checked out Eddy's spoken word work, it's phenomenal. And I know I'm a big fan, and just it's great to be working with such an amazing team, not just within the internal hosts and the behind the scenes crew, but also within Fil-CHA. But thank you so much, Eddy, for that introduction, and for all those that have introduced themselves. Hello, my name is Arleah Aguilar, and I'm affiliated currently with Fil-CHA solely. I am a pre-med student preparing for applications and involved in the application cycle. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do right now is just focus on a lot of personal growth. I was the kind of person that was involved in so many different spaces, working in so many different places, that during this situation that we're in right now with COVID-19, I really just wanted to take time for growth and self-love. So that's currently what I'm doing, is giving all my energy to myself and to Fil-CHA solely. I had the gracious opportunity to be the project coordinator for the podcast. And so that's another thing I'm doing, working with AAPCHO behind the scenes, doing a lot of the work as well. Other interests, though, outside of community organizing and my affiliations with being a pre-med student, involves doing a lot of music and journaling and self-reflecting. I know self-reflecting kind of sounds more of a growth thing than an interest thing, but I think for me that kind of entails doing things that are good for the soul. So I've been really trying to practice more cooking, doing a lot more Filipino food. I know I've been reaching out to my mom and my aunt a lot about their recipes, because they're like, oh, there's always the internet, like they're willing to help. But I'm like, but they're like, the internet has more places that actual recipes that you can follow, because how Filipino mamas and titas are. They mostly just do a lot of cooking based off of their memory and taste. So they're like, we don't really know exactly our exact measurements. But I love that aspect of cooking, where it's a very cultural thing. As you all know, the different regions of the Philippines, there's so many different ways to cook food. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do in regards to self-growth, and also just reconnecting with my community and with my Filipino background. But yeah, so cooking, being active, a lot of journaling and singing. I was in musical theater. Don't do so much of it now, but definitely hoping to do more in the future. But yeah, so I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about is why I got involved in Fil-CHA. So wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to my mentor with my in my postbac program, Dr. Arleah Aguilar. He introduced me to our amazing leader, Dr. Inez Ponce, who then she introduced me to Dr. Carlos Aronce, who's also leading our Fil-CHA team. And I just had such a, I was working on myself a lot through this pandemic, as I mentioned, but I was lacking the community side of it. As I mentioned, I was involved in a lot of different spaces. And during COVID, I just really focused on myself and my education, and of course, trying to keep my job if I could. But I just felt really down for many reasons, right? It's okay to talk about feelings. It's okay to feel certain ways and not always be on it and happy. But I was like, I'm going to do something about it though. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Talked to my mentor, did a check-in, and he introduced me to Dr. Inez Ponce, and that's how I got involved with this team. I really wanted to get back into doing community work, and I thought the work that Dr. Ponce wanted to do was phenomenal. I think Andrea talked about, or Leezel was talking about lacking data or just representation of the Filipinx AO community. And so having this space where we can come together as our different backgrounds, because of the fact that we have many different professionals, many different perspectives and people within our spaces. It really drove me to want to be involved in something like this. So really grateful, and that's a big reason that I decided to get involved with Fil-CHA. But yeah, thank you so much, Eddy. Passing it back to you.
All right. So thinking about like what brings us all here and why we do what we do, I'd like to hear more from Leezel.
Sure. So that's such a big question. So I would like to answer it. Usually the way I think about things is usually in threes. So I would say I look at it from the three eyes. So the first would be integrity. I think integrity in the sense of like, I'm a Filipino, like being proud of that and not being afraid to, making sure that that shows in any type of work I do. I would say also innovation. Innovation doesn't have to be anything new. I think a lot of what we're doing here today has been a result of just spaces our ancestors, our other folks that have gone before us have already formed. So just building on top of that. And lastly, why do I do the things I do is ultimately it's for impact. I think our time is not a renewable resource. I think especially within this last year, we've learned that all. And just making sure, anything being very intentional and making sure any project or any initiative I'm involved in, it has impact. And ultimately that's why I want to make sure anything that whatever I leave here, will be sustainable and continues to continue to move on. So
Thank you so much, Leezel. I hope that folks are taking notes on that. Focusing on the integrity, the innovation, and impact. 3 I's. Okay, folks, take notes. All right. So how about Andrea?
I mean, I kind of touched on it a little bit before, but this is heart work. We this is a narrative, our data, our stories. It's all coming together in this one space, and we do this out of love, and we do this, like Leezel said. We want to see the impact, we want to see the change, and so striving for that change, it's building collectively together. We've seen in the past and history how, we have that resiliency, we have that resistance in our blood. Like Faith Cynthia said, in us, we have 500 years of strength and resistance, like we'll keep it going. And so that's a lot of those same emotions bring me to here. And I just want to give a shout out. I forgot to mention, earlier how I came into Fil-CHA, but my good friend Alex Adia really brought me on. And see, that's the community collaboration coming in. And yeah, that brings me all here. And I'm very excited.
All right. Yeah, that community building, right? I also forgot how I forgot to say like how I got involved. So shout out to Aaron Manalo Pedro for getting me involved with the collective that we have now. Just within community spaces, from marches to open mics, and fighting for peace studies, Filipinx studies, all together. It's very, very important that for us as a community that we know that we are not alone, and we're not. Being able to reach out and to work together for a common goal. And so, how about with Bradley?
Yeah, Andrea, I love that you mentioned history. And so, why do I do what I do? When I was in undergrad, I had the opportunity to go to the Stockton, California, home of the Little Manila Historic Site, which is seen in some of our Zoom backgrounds. And it was really there that I truly learned kind of like what it means to be part of a community, and how important like history is. And you always say like no history, no self. And I just fell in love with like the community. Being a pharmacy student, I really wanted to see how I can connect community work as well as the expertise and knowledge that I have. I fell in love with pharmacy because they are the closest health workers to the community. Anywhere you go, any street corner, you can see a pharmacist. And I just think they're so like underutilized potential in pharmacy. And I didn't see a lot of pharmacists, at least Filipino pharmacists growing up. And so, being involved with things like this, I hope that somewhere down the line, there's another, aspiring Filipino pharmacist. I was like, oh my gosh, like you see Bradley. And I hope that, I always believe that a movement has to outlive its leaders. Just, again, thinking about history and everything, we kind of carry on the light that they passed. So yeah, that's really why I do what I do.
I mean, there you go. I mean, see like a lot of nodding heads, and then, shout out to all pharmacists, and for you, Bradley, for finding that connection, finding your purpose in life. And that's really dope that you mentioned Little Manila, because for me myself, I'm from Union City, as I mentioned earlier. It's pretty much, if y'all are not familiar with Union City, it's like like Daly City, just a bit smaller. So Filipino enclave. And now that I'm here in LA, I found a home in historic Filipino town. With historic Filipino town, recognizing that we are here, that we are now, that it's not a misnomer, that it's historic and that it's all in the past. It's like, no, we continue to still do work and also acknowledge the communities that exist in the neighborhood, the Latinx communities, the Black communities, and so forth. And so, with that said, what drives me with the work that I do now is that community building. My background is in social work, and with community building, what's most important is that relationship building. So getting to know like where folks are at, what the needs are, and if there are resources to share it, not to keep it alone or be like, oh no, this is my resource. I won't share it with anyone else, or kind of thing. It's like, no, let's share it. Let's be collaborative as opposed to competitive. And then with that, like in building, getting to learn each other through the arts. Again, like even with this podcast here, like the importance of sharing stories, that there is vital. I'm like super inspired by people's stories, the therapeutic elements of it for self-expression, for personal growth, and ultimately for greater social change. With all that said, it drives the work that I do. And like you mentioned earlier, Bradley, the movement continues on, no matter the folks that are involved in it. It reminds me of this quote from Blue Scholars, revolutionaries die, but the revolution won't, right? And so, just got to keep on pushing. But enough of me. Actually, let's bring it back to Arleah.
Thanks, Eddy. You always inspire me whenever I hear you talking about things. So I really appreciate hearing why you do what you do and kind of learning more about you. We work very closely together in Fil-CHA. Everyone here, we have meetings, but this is kind of the first time we're really just talking and getting to know each other on a more personal level. So it's really awesome hearing everyone's stories. And as you all already do, you inspire me and continue to do so. And the more I learn, the more I just want to be your friends. even more. But thank you, Eddy. So funny, I'm the one who asked this question, yet I don't even know what to say for it. But I guess why I do what I do, it is a loaded question, but it is open-ended in the sense that I'm still learning why I do what I do, and it's always continuously changing, but in a way that's growth. It's not really changing in the sense of, oh, today I want to do something, next year it's a different reason. What I mean is that every time I figure myself out, every time I'm growing individually, but also within the community, it's only reemphasizing and stacking on to more of the reasons why I do what I do. Initially, when I got involved in Fil-Am spaces, it's because I grew up in a very small town where there wasn't really a big Fil-Am community. Although my parents helped start an association out there because my dad went out to where I'm from for college. And I like to say that the Fil-Am out in where I'm from is a very small but mighty association. We have a lot of individuals who are just so passionate and have helped me become who I am. So how they say it takes a village to raise a child. I definitely believe that my village has made me who I am today. But I got involved in Fil-Am to just really learn more about myself. I did grow up understanding the Filipino culture, ate the food, learned the language. I'm that interesting person that can understand the language completely, but cannot speak it for the life of me. I mean, if I was probably in a very alone in the middle of the Philippines and I needed to, I probably could work my way around it, but I'm one of those people. I just really wanted to learn more and just meet people my age who really valued the Fil-Am community and their culture and was really proud to represent it. Not that I wasn't proud, but I definitely didn't really know what it meant to be Filipino American. It's a very hybrid identity. It's very different than just being solely Filipino. It's very different than just being solely American. And so I really wanted to know what that meant for myself, not what my parents taught me, not what my village in my hometown taught me, but really understanding what that meant for myself. But beyond the personal, on a more community level, I really wanted to get involved and do work because, as I mentioned, I felt like my community is what helped me grow to be who I was, and I really wanted to do that as well for others. I know that I grew up pretty privileged in the sense that I had everything I needed. I had the support, I had love from my family, and I had extended family and my community helping me thrive. Of course, not to say there weren't struggles, but I do believe that my parents came here and my grandparents came here with the goal of giving me a better life than they had, and I had that, and I recognized that. And what I wanted to do is make sure that I use this privilege for good and to contribute that to others, to be able to recognize that privilege and be able to share that with those that may not have had the same privileges, because I'm a believer that no one chooses how they're born in the situations they're in. And I think I know I've gone through struggles, but I do believe that I still have it a lot better than a lot of folks. And so I really I wanted to get involved within my community, within other spaces. And so in college, I was a part of the Fil-Am Association there. That's where I met the amazing Bradley. And that's where I just started doing a lot of community organizing. I'm a pre-med student, so I want to go into healthcare because I really, again, want to use that privilege to be able to help people. I believe that health is one of the most valuable things you can have. Again, something that we've learned through this time. And I want to be able to help people take care of themselves, because I may not be able to fix all the problems in the world, but I do believe if you have your health, health is wealth, right? So that's a big reason I wanted to go into medicine. But I think that we can learn so much from community organizing, from public health. I think public health is probably one of the most important things right now, especially with this pandemic, and really recognizing what that means. So I've been trying to get more involved in those different spaces, because I think as a future healthcare professional, I think that it's a valuable perspective to have. And to be able to maintain that perspective. And so learning the things that I have in my Fil-Am spaces, trying to integrate that in public health worlds that I'm involved in as well as a future healthcare professional. I think it's just really all about acknowledging the privilege that I've had and sharing that with others and trying to build each other up. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I could talk more about other things, but stay connected and you'll probably hear from me in future podcasts. So thank you, Eddy. Passing it back to you.
All right. No, most definitely. Let's build each other up, not build each other down, right? Let's build up. Let's go up. Sky's the limit. Let's keep on going. All right. So the podcast, right? So and all that. So why does this podcast exist? Leezel, if you can bring us into that with why we call ourselves that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure. Let me set this up. So, with every great project or initiative, there's always a great origin story. So let's find out a little bit more about that. So I guess to my esteemed colleagues here, how did we come up with the name PST?
Yeah, pretty clever name if you ask me. So Pilipinx AO, sharing stories together, is what it sounds like. We are sharing stories together, especially in this time. It's so important to share stories. With the technology that we have today, I think sharing stories is easier than ever, and if anything, more important than ever. So kind of like what we mentioned before, data is very important. It drives, a lot of decision making, and really, we use it to make a lot of decisions. But I think you sometimes lose a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, the color and like the grit, and dare I say flavor of, our community and the people behind those numbers. And so it's so important that we, emphasize and highlight these stories, that they don't get lost. During this time, there's so many stories that, deserve to be told, and so many lessons that we can, learn from them. So it just really brings in the humanity to these numbers, some faces and stories and feeling and emotion to, we're bombarded with statistics every day, especially if you watch the news, but there are people behind that. So, and clever names, we want something that could be somewhat universally understood, because we have such varying differences and diversity, and variety in the Philippine archipelago. So yeah, what a clever name.
Very clever and very Filipino. Thank you, Bradley. And how has COVID-19 affected the Filipinx AO community?
Yeah. Well, to start off with, there's a lot of data, but like Bradley said, these are, what I'm going to talk about next, these are people with real lives, people we hold in our hearts, and just want to do that ancestor acknowledgement that, when we talk about, the impact on our community, one of those things would be, looking at our nurses. So despite just comprising 4% of all nurses in the US, we make up, an estimated 32% of COVID-19 deaths. And to even get that information, it was really difficult. Dr. Nunes Ponces and the rest of folks on this team really had to dig in deep, go through restricted data, just to even get that. The barriers that we have to cross to be able to get that, just the data alone. And then on the opposite end, when we're seeing, why are those things happening? We have, health disparities. We have high rates of those comorbidities, diabetes, heart disease. All of these play a role into, our health. And then also structural factors. The Pulisan Center at UC Davis, found that it's undocumented status, lack of health insurance, economic insecurity that really contribute. So you have those structural issues, you have the health issues, and it's not a surprise, but a lot of people were shocked to see this, and it's still not getting enough attention. And so hopefully, we're going to be honoring our ancestors by, pushing and fighting and demanding, that people take into account who we are, and honor those histories and lives that we've lost, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think it's an interesting intersection of just information and just stories. I mean, it's just integral to who we are as Filipinos. It's the, like they say, the hugot, but also the facts when you put them together. So thank you for that. So I'm going to toss it over to Bradley.
Yeah, so for a lot of you, this may be the first time that you are hearing about Fil-CHA. So I think it's really important that you kind of know who we are and where we're coming from. So Arleah, who is Fil-CHA?
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. And thanks to those that had answered our previous questions earlier. So who is Fil-CHA? You all are probably like, oh, who is this team that we're talking about? And, we wanted to talk a little bit about our podcast first, given that, it's our pilot episode, wanted you all to get to know who we are, what this podcast is all about. But now we're going to talk a little bit about who houses us. So Fil-CHA stands for Filipinx AO Community Health Association, Fil-CHA. And the reason we picked it is because, as Filipinos, we love to sing and dance. No, I'm kidding. It's not because of the cha-cha-cha. Fil-CHA is just because it stands for Community Health Association. But as I mentioned earlier briefly, we are led by Dr. Nunes Ponce and Dr. Carlos Aronce as president and president-elect, respectively. And the association started off as the Filipinx AO COVID-19 Resource and Response Team. And we started off because, as Andrea mentioned, a lot of data, not just for Filipinx AO in general, but very specifically in COVID-19, we were being not necessarily misrepresented, but rather the data was lacking to truly show how impacted we were. And when we did look at the data, we saw that Filipinx AO community members were actually disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And we couldn't see that because the data that we did have was just looking at Asian American data. So it's how do you really make initiatives? How do you make change if you don't even know a community is being affected? And the only way we really knew that Filipinx AO members were being affected is because of the individual community work that people were doing within their own respective spaces. Andrea mentioned a couple of places like Bulisan Center, Kanalugan. If I mispronounce that, as I mentioned, Tagalog is not my first language and I don't speak it really well. But that's another website that talks about the individual stories of the ones that we would love to remember and share our respects and condolences to those families, because we or the community that was putting together the website, it's all volunteer based, it's all initiative, and it's just talking about the different stories of individuals and lives that we've lost due to COVID in the Fil-Am community. And so we do have all these individual communities and organizations working towards trying to disaggregate data. We have wonderful researchers, we have phenomenal healthcare workers, public health individuals, social workers, so many individual phenomenal people that the list goes on of all the work that's being done. But we didn't really have a space to congregate and share those resources, because other than collecting the data, what's important is being able to share that data. Because what is data if, one, we don't share it with the public, beyond just the professionals, and then two, what is data if we don't do anything with the data? So Fil-CHA was started by Dr. Inez Ponce because she does a lot of phenomenal work with UCLA, and she does a lot of similar data work and survey interview work within her different spaces. And so she thought, why not do this for our space? You know, she identifies as Filipino American, and we were missing this important part of our community. And, you know, we, as many of the individuals here have said, we're stronger in numbers. It's all about uplifting each other in the work that we're doing. And so this space is intergenerational, it's collaborative, it's multidisciplinary. We have many different backgrounds from all the individual professionals that I've already mentioned, as well as psychologists, pharmacists, different professionals beyond healthcare. We have nurses, the people that are impacted heavily because of COVID-19. We're hearing the different voices within our own team. And so that's a big reason that, you know, initially we were here talking about COVID-19 data, disaggregating that data, COVID-19 effects on the community. So that's why our name was Filipinx AO COVID-19 Resource and Response Team, because it was about, here are our stories, here's what our communities are seeing. What are we doing about that within our own spaces? How can we uplift and share that opportunities with others, and also collaborate? And so it was all surrounding COVID-19 initially, but as the team of course, with wonderful minds, there's always going to be phenomenal projects and ideas that come along with that. And so we just kept growing and growing. And we started off with, I think, you know, just a handful of people, and now we're close to 80 individuals just within our membership. And we're ever so growing. I'm always, you know, I'm doing secretary work for the team, and so I'm always getting emails about people to invite. And so it's so heartwarming to see all those that want to get involved. And so with that growth, of course, we realized that, you know, COVID-19 is something that will hopefully eventually die down a bit. And so the goal then is, well, how do we continue moving forward? Because we're doing great work. We're realizing so much how much we can collaborate and do more together. So instead of maintaining the COVID-19 part, as we try to incorporate as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, we decided to transition to the Filipinx AO Community Health Association. And so that's why we decided to change our name, because we are community organizers. You know, whatever we're doing by day, we're always community organizers by night within this team. And so that's where the community part comes from. Health is because that health and well-being and wellness all incorporated into that. Health isn't just about your physical health, it's about mental health, social health, so many different types of health, right? Health is just a word that defines being in a pristine condition, I guess is the best way I can think of right now without looking up a dictionary definition. And then association, because we are more than just a team. We are more than just members. We are a collective of individuals who are here to do work for the community. And so that's how Fil-CHA started. And then we'll talk a little bit in a bit about why the XAO and why the P versus the F, because in our podcast, it's Pilipinx with a P. And then in our name, it's Filipinx with an F, but we did that for a reason. And it's a conversation starter first off, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. So yeah, that's who we are as Fil-CHA, how we started, who our leaders are. We have another group of board members who are all phenomenal and helpful and have been there through it all, who are a part of our team as well as officers. If you want to learn more about that, you know, continue on with our podcast, follow us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and our social media accounts on Twitter, because we're going to be doing shout outs to those individuals. We have such a great team. So many of us, like I said, there's 80, so I can't list off everyone. But yeah, that's who we are, and we hope to continue to grow with you and for you to learn more about us as we continue on with these podcasts. So I'm going to pass on the mic back to Bradley, but thank you so much for hearing a little bit about our history. We did just start in December. I know it sounds like there's a big history there, but it's really just been one of those things that it's kind of like, why not a national Phil-Am association that does this kind of work? So it's been kind of a long going question that, just happened, that was inspired by, well, I wouldn't want to say inspired because, there's some pitfalls to the hardships that we've gone through in COVID, but it gave us the initiative and the, kind of pushed us to be motivated to create this space even more because of COVID-19. But yeah, so I think my last thing I wanted to say, sorry, before I pass it off to Bradley, is although we are new and young, just to show you how valuable community organizing is. So in November, I met with Dr. Inez Ponce to talk about what she envisioned for this team. And then we recruited people, and within a week, we started meeting. And then come December, so I met with Dr. Ponce end of November or mid-November. Come early December, we started our podcast. And I remember this because it was the day of my partner's birthday. And so this team's birthday, or this association's birthday, is the same as my partner, so I can't forget it. And I remember that day we hit the ground running, talked about our associations and why we're involved in this team, why we were interested in joining. And then Dr. Carlos Aronce had this idea of writing a policy letter to Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith, who at the time was the nominated chair elect for the health equity team for the White House. And we wanted to write a letter to talk about our concerns. And we were able to, within a month, write that letter. And it was like a couple pages long, talking about how the community's been impacted by COVID and what our policy advice is. And then on top of that, we got around 600 signatures in less than 2 days. So that shows you how community can make such an impact. And at the time, I think our team was only about half the size, 40 people. So 40 people were able to collect almost 600 signatures. And so if that doesn't show you how community coming together can impact, the work that we do, I don't know what will. But so I just wanted to share that because that's a piece of our history, as well as shows you how valuable community and networking is and how we can make impact and change if we just work together to do so. So now I'm going to pass on the mic to Bradley.
Oh, thank you, Arleah. She's always the best person to ask because she's been there from the beginning. But yeah, I think I love that you highlighted just how powerful, community can be. That letter is just one example of many. And I think it's important that we mention how you said, like, we started in response to COVID-19. And I think that really showed how important data, as well as more importantly, disaggregated data really shows a lot more nuance, than you maybe below the surface. But in addition to being so data driven and how important data is, I think we are also very much community driven. And I think a lot of our decisions should come from that. We also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of great work that's already being done in the community, and we want to acknowledge that, hey, we're all doing good work. There's no reason to, overshadow or, put down anyone. We're all doing very important work, including Kanlugan, another website that they are putting together a ton of stories of the impact of COVID-19 on, Filipinos across the globe. It's just one example of, some of the other folks who are doing amazing work during this time. So I'd like to just move on to the next question. Arleah kind of hinted at it. So why Filipinx AO?
Yeah. So, if we're advocating for inclusion and equity, our space has to reflect that. And so we utilize Filipinx, Filipina, and Filipino to really respect and incorporate all identities who identify with either of those terms. If you're unfamiliar with Filipinx, it acknowledges, if you don't identify with the gender binary, that has been an option. And so, I want to plug Steady. Eddy's spoken word poetry talks about the X in a poem if you want to get to know a little bit more in a great piece. And so that's the simple version. There's a lot of articles we can definitely share out if you're still a little bit more confused. But yes, we're utilizing Filipinx, Filipina, Filipino, and we're centering it the XAO because who's at the margins within our margins, and so we want to center them first, and so hence the order.
Yeah, I love what you said. We want to make sure that we center folks that are in the margins and even the margins of the margins. And so that really is where, we're coming from when it comes to Filipinx AO. So then next, why the P versus the F and vice versa?
Yes, the P versus the F and vice versa, going back and forth. Even before that, also for the Filipinx to recognize how it came out of essentially the Latinx movement as well too, and that there is also important, just in terms of the context of communities, and also for us as Filipinx finding our own identities, because language changes over time and it is fluid. Now thinking about P versus F, well, with P, that's to reclaim our people's alphabet. F is not indigenous. So thinking about the Philippines and being colonized by Spain, Andrea mentioned it earlier, over 500 years. And so with P, that there was a movement to reclaim that, to find, again, the history that was stolen from us, that was erased from us. And I first learned about this thanks to Filipino Youth Coalition. And thankfully, shout out to those who have taken ethnic studies courses. I also took Filipino Heritage Studies at James Logan High School. I just wanted, to acknowledge that, because with ethnic studies, that there is it's our people's history, and our people's history should be a requirement, not an elective. And if I didn't have these classes, I didn't have these spaces, I wouldn't have known about this. And this was for me, not to date myself, but this was early 2000s. But the movement in terms of the P versus the F, that's been longer than that. Possibly even longer than the names about to mention, but through my research and learning about SIPA, Search and Develop Filipino Americans, one of the founders, his name is Uncle Roy Morales, and founded the organization in 1972 with Helen Brown and Al Mendoza and so many others. And so with him, history was very important. And this is what I hear, right? I wish that I've met him. But again, it just shows about the importance of community building and to keep our knowledge going, so it does not be erased. And so from the 70s, going into the 80s and 90s, I'm organizing. So we have Search and Develop Filipino Americans, we have Filipino Workers Center. So you notice that the Filipino there, that it is Filipino, it's not Filipino. So again, just that reclamation of our people's history. And of course, this is a larger conversation about decolonization that we can get into, but perhaps we'll save that for another episode. For sure, we will definitely say that for another episode, because we have plenty more. But just as a baseline to talk about why Filipinx, why Filipina, why Filipino, why Filipino or Filipino. But all together, the aim is for inclusivity. The aim is for intersectionality. For me, myself, as genderqueer, the aim is for safety. And so, just thankful for folks who are tuning in for our pilot episode here, because we got a lot more coming up. Definitely got a lot more coming up. So, coming up next, actually, Arleah, because Arleah does so much work. Also, I want to shout out to Arleah, behind the scenes, right here in the podcast, incredible labor. All labor is valid, going back to what Brad Bradley talked about earlier. But Arleah, please tell us more about what we got next.
Yeah, so first off, thank you so much to everyone that is here today watching on Facebook Live, the attendees that are here through the Zoom webinar, as well as to our phenomenal internal hosts and all the people doing back work and behind the scenes for us through AAPCHO as well as through Fil-CHA. So I just wanted to mention, we are wrapping up our episode and our pilot episode, but hopefully this got you all excited to learn more what we have to offer. This main podcast goal is going to be surrounding how COVID-19 has affected the Filipinx AO community. So tune in to learn more. Next week's episode is our first official episode. So this is our pilot. Next week, we will be talking about vaccine and COVID-19 general information, given that, as I mentioned, our bigger goal is to kind of talk about how the Fil-Am community has been affected by COVID-19. So we thought it'd be a perfect way to talk about vaccines and COVID-19, especially with the vaccine rollout, and lots of different places, at least in California, are allowing anyone above the age of 16 to get their vaccine. Perfect time to kind of talk more about that. So if you have questions, please join us through the webinar on the Facebook page, like us so that you can get notifications on the Facebook page. It's also Fil-XAO-CHA, just like all our handles. So again, that's Phil, but with an F as in friends, and then Fil, F-I-L-X-A-O, and then CHA, C-H-A. So please join us on those different forums or register for our webinars so that you can be a part of the panel on Zoom. And then you can just submit questions or anything that you have through Facebook or through our Q&A portion of the Zoom webinar, because next week we're going to have lots of different conversations surrounding the vaccine and COVID-19 in general. Our wonderful guest speaker will be our own Dr. Carlos Aronce. He is a family physician, and so he'll have lots of advice to share and perspectives to provide us. And then we also have our external hosts will be Rochelle Ocampo. And for the moving forward for the other episodes, unfortunately, all of the internal hosts will not be together at the same time anymore. Maybe in our final episode we will be, but moving forward, all of us internal hosts will be taking turns rotating as the internal hosts. The reason it's called internal is because they we are individuals within the Fil-CHA organization. So we represent Fil-CHA, but because we wanted this to be a community based podcast and we wanted to hear from the community, we wanted to incorporate the community, we have an external host, which really just means someone outside of our organization who is affiliated within or identifies within the Filipinx AO community. And they are all phenomenal individuals who we're very excited to share the space with. And then within the episode itself, we'll have a guest speaker who has an expert background in the topics we'll be discussing. So as I mentioned, Dr. Carlos Aronce is a physician, and so he will be discussing the vaccine and just some general COVID-19 information. So yeah, please reach out, share, ask questions in the comments, reach out to us on Facebook. We have our email attached on there. But yeah, please like and follow us. Again, big thank you to AAPCHO for all the support and for the Walmart Foundation for making this podcast possible. And we thank you all so much for all of your support to this day, and for the continuous love and the community guidance you all have provided us. We do this for you all, and we hope that you continue on this journey. Please spread the word, and much love, salamat, and thank you for being a part of this podcast with us. Anything from the other internal hosts? All right.
I was going to say, isang bagsak, one down,
oh, yeah.
on to the next. One of us fall down, we all fall down. If one of us rise, we all rise, and let's all rise together. Yes. Yes, most definitely. Oh, that we will do it now, right now, live. Yes.
Oh, yes, let's do it. We're on time.
Okay,
Eddy, would you like to lead?
Do it, yeah. So with Isang Baksak, to recognize its history, that it was used during the People Power movement, when folks organized against the dictator at the time in the Philippines. And it was also used in the labor movement between Filipino American and Mexican American agricultural workers. And so thinking about that and its history, Isang Baksak is also used with the unity clap, just to give like a full history of the unity clap. And the unity clap was in the labor movement. But in terms of like bringing together the unity clap and Isang Baksak, that's thanks to youth organizers in the early 2000s. And so what we can do here, since we are on live and there is a delay, is that we can go ahead and try the unity clap. So it's where everyone will start to clap like the heartbeat of the people. It will go slow at first, and it'll go faster and faster and faster, as if we are reaching our goal, as if we are coming together, as if we are building that momentum for our people, right? And then we all say Isang Baksak, and then clap together as one in solidarity, right here for Fil-CHA, right here for PSST, okay? All right. So again, so like this, Isang Baksak, Bam. And we'll do that. All right. So let's go ahead and bring it on strong.
All right, internal hosts, let's unmute ourselves.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Let's try
ready.
it out. Let's try it out. Okay,
See if we
let's
can
hear
do
it.
this.
Let's go. All right, here we go. Isang bagsak. Hey,
All right.
that
I
worked.
apologize
That worked, y'all.
if
Thanks
we
for tuning
blew up
in.
anyone's mics.
Oh yeah, sorry, try not to clap too. Oh, well, thank you so much, Eddy, for that phenomenal explanation. Word of the day, phenomenal. P, that's actually what the P stands for, and just kidding. But I realized I was saying phenomenal, but that's just the only word that I could think of to describe the people that I've been working with, this team, and just the community work that we're all doing. So thank you, Eddy, for that wonderful explanation. Thank you for all the internal hosts that came today and that are taking time out of their lives that, you know, they're already doing so much work and they're here to help us through this, to make this podcast possible. So thank you so much to the internal hosts that were here today and for all the people behind the scenes and for Fil-CHA. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for celebrating with us and enjoying this Saturday day, afternoon, wherever you are, morning. Thank you.
Thank you.